Right, I'm going to speak about a few things. One of the things that I think is really important from our point of view, from a policing point of view, is there isn't a distinction between the online world and the real world. It's so integrated nowadays that actually it's all one in the same place. And we've created problems for ourselves, I think, in the past, where we've actually made that distinction between the two. So for young people, that distinction isn't there. I don't know if you can just click in the bottom corner there, that'll make it full screen. Yeah. That's good. I've got a few bits in here. I've got a couple of little videos. They may show adults, but obviously the themes are because they translate across, and hopefully it will make it obvious as we go through. So this first one is just a really good example of the information we share and how vulnerable it makes us.
What's the name?
Joel.
What was the name?
Alex.
Alex. Very good, Johnny.
If you like our Facebook page, we give you a free hot drink and a free pastry.
We have a new line today, yes. We have a new line today.
Stand by.
Hi there, can I help?
Just liked your Facebook page.
Okay, I'll search Facebook now. Search Google. Phone number.
Got his email address.
Okay, Carly, are you ready?
Information on Damien. On this maiden name is Quinn.
Mama, what should I do if someone makes me uncomfortable?
Your date of birth, 7th of May. She lives at
Sonia, can you tell me what happens when you disturb a butterfly? Or a bird?
Yeah, got it.
A turtle?
Damien, age 26 and fitness instructor.
How about a puppy?
Road goes to UCL, Martin went to South Thames College, assistant psychologist at Great Ormond Street.
And I'm Christian as well.
Oh yeah, we know everything about you, Martin. Thank you.
Face, hands, and legs are our body parts
Something
that
floating in
can
the
be
background.
seen. We also have body parts which are covered, and they are of our body that are covered by our swimsuit are our private parts. Private parts are our personal spaces in the body and are not to be seen.
There's a strange track overlaid in the background, but hopefully that gets some of the point across.
It will be the next up video on YouTube, I think.
Well, highlight it. It shows just how much information we do share, how available that is. So what I'm very quickly going to talk about is actually each new technology, service and social network we create and adopt increases the vectors for exploitation. It's great. It allows us to tailor our environment around us, but actually there is massive vulnerability in that, and we need to understand that as we're working through. So this is the internet. The internet is great. The great thing about the internet is it's very difficult to put restrictions on it. It gives people voices that we would never have heard previously, and opens up the world. The bad thing about the internet is it's very difficult to put restrictions on it, and it gives people voices that maybe you don't need in this environment. So its strength and its weakness sort of lie in the same thing. And now we've got the issues of the Internet of Things, connected devices. Every room in the house has got something that's communicating to each other, even the fridge and the kettle and all the sort of different devices. You've got your smart assistants, you've got Alexa, Siri, Google. You're interacting with these devices every minute of the day, and they're sending out messages all the time. And it's not just in the home, it's in the street. So your devices you're carrying around with you are interacting with vehicles and the things. You've got your shops, you've got your shopping centres. Movements are tracked within those, even without your consent. A lot of the time this information is being shared. And then you've got the developing technologies like smart cars and self-driving cars, which you integrate with. You've got your smartphones, which will pass all the information into them, or your contacts. Suddenly, that's a further extension of everything that you're doing. Now, some of these slides got a lot of information. I'm not going to talk about all the different aspects, but this is really interesting. This is something PwC just put together just to show the development of robotics and artificial intelligence. What's really interesting for me is what was written as a bit of fiction in 1941 by Isaac Asimov is possibly something that we really need to start considering now. And that becomes more apparent as we start to look at the way things are developing and the integration of technologies. And as I say, everything is integrated around us now. And as we move forwards, this is something illustrating something called Moore's Law, which was about essentially the speed of computers and how they increase. In actual fact, it's not quite held true for the last couple of years, but then on the horizon, we've got different approaches to computing, which will mean that actually it could go exponentially even more different. And even on this model, in 2045, it surpasses the brain power equivalent to that of all human brains combined in a standard computer. So technology is moving at such a massive rate that people, such as Stephen Hawking, clearly some of the greatest minds of our generation, are very concerned about the way that technology is developing, almost without a control around it. Elon Musk, who's obviously about to launch a rocket today, is also talking about the issues and the fact that we need that oversight. And I think one of the most important ones, Shannon Valler, philosophy at Santa Clara University, is all about actually, it's the ethics. And these are the things that often get missed out. That when we're actually doing this, we need to be thinking about, these are the risks. AI turning competent with goals misaligned with our own. Now that's a really interesting one, because whose goals is it? People creating the technology, are they the right people? Are they representative of society? Is the society producing the technology representative of the global community? There are lots of issues on an ethical basis that need answering when we're sort of working with this technology. And this is something that isn't for the next generation, it's for the emerging generation to start understanding and bringing this through. So this is one of the things that we need to start looking at in a changing world, along with the risks that we have in the current world. And some of the issues here, I put an article at the bottom. This is a lass by the name of Paris Brown. She was the first youth commissioner working with the police in Kent. She got the job when she was 17. She held it a week. She lost it because of the Twitter post, Twitter tweets that she made when she was 14. So she made tweets at the age of 14 that lost her job when she got it at 17. Really good example of how you need to be really aware of the whole of your social media footprint and how it may be life-changing as you sort of grow up. But then, you know, we've got the threats of the internet troll and the photo boy of 14. We've got technology, so things like the ability to turn on web cameras in computers if they're not protected properly, and then the exploitation that follows on the back of that. Cyber criminals under 10, obviously these technologies are freely available. YouTube will tell you how to do just about anything you want to do. And young people are very conversant with the technology, so they'll be adopting it a lot earlier and quicker than we are. And coming from Leicestershire, I can't go forward without mentioning the tragic case of Kaylee Haywood, and she was murdered following online grooming. It was a really quick process, frighteningly enough, but she was groomed very quickly online, met up with the perpetrators, and unfortunately they abused and killed her. It's a terrible one. There's some really good resources that have been produced as a result of that. The Leicestershire Police website have got links into an educational video that's been shown in all the schools in Leicestershire and has been going wider as well. But a very tragic story. And Tony Byron, obviously only in the last few days, has been talking about the issues about how we haven't been addressing a lot of these problems. And what's interesting, I think the comment at the bottom, even if children were carefully supervised and kept to age-appropriate games, hidden communication features meant they could become victims of predators who use games to target children. This highlights, really, for me, that this isn't about putting restrictions on everything that people do, because you can't. It's the internet. It's very difficult to put restrictions on it. It's all about education and awareness and allowing people to make informed choices. And if you empower people with the knowledge, then hopefully they'll make better choices. It's a short video. It speaks for itself, really.
Toe. Head. Hair. Ear. Neck. Back. Shoulder. Arm.
I think that pretty much says it all. And again, that's about the highlighting that it is the real world. It is an online world and a real world. It's all the same. And actually, it's just different vehicles. Unfortunately, there's just so many more different vehicles that are available for children than previously. I'm going to skip through this one. This would have been a generational thing. Yeah. This was a public information video about children not going with strangers when they're in public. Well, it's the same message. It just translates now into the real world. This is a little bit about the information we share. This is something called the Conversation Prism, which tried to bring it together and has been going through several different iterations. An idea of all the different areas that we post and interact data, and under the different circumstances we do it. And when you start to look at the amount of digital footprint we leave all over the place, it's absolutely frightening. And these are all the different sort of services where we leave some of those footprints. And it's by no means a definitive list. But it gives some impression of it. This was in the news very recently, and it's a very good example of where technology can leak out and give unwanted things. These are the fitness apps. So this was Strava. In this case, it was the security concerns about our troops and showing some of the bases. Because it was monitoring their movements within that, it was shown on a public map. You could see the movements of that. And it wasn't necessarily the bases themselves, so that's secret. Often you can look on Google Maps and you can see them. But actually, it showed running routes outside of the base area. It showed patrol routes outside of the base areas. All these unintended consequences of this technology. And when you translate that to someone who's got an inappropriate interest in a child and the vulnerability that that potentially exposes them to, it starts to become quite frightening. And then you've got things like Google. When you look at Google, you trust us with your data. And they talk about what data they share. And when you actually start digging into the data they have, it's quite frightening. So they record the things that you do, things that you search for, websites you visit, videos that you watch, all of your online activity, they're taking note of. Then they look at the things that you create, so emails. If you use things like Gmail, it's looking into the content, it's understanding what you're doing, what the communications are, who you're talking to, what you're talking about, looking at calendar events, photos, videos, and then things that make you you. Is that 2 minutes already? Wow. And all the personal information as well. And then it's starting to work with that. But depending on how you put your privacy settings, and it's exactly the same for Facebook, all the different sort of information that collects in relation to it. Yeah, very briefly, I'm going to show the first little bit of this because this is
Superb.
in fact, I'm not showing the first bit of it because this is all about the try the volume on the thing just to see if it does overlay too much.
And online surveillance program run by the CIA. According to Department of Homeland Security reports, Facebook has replaced almost every other CIA information gathering program since it was launched in 2004.
After years of secret
constantly monitoring the public. We were astounded. So many people would willingly publicize where they live, their religious and political views, an alphabetized list of all their friends' personal email addresses.
It's an amazing day.
Hundreds
Hi,
of
friends.
Okay. Don't worry. So all that did was illustrate the fact that all that information is out there. It's very freely available. You've got to think about things like privacy settings and stuff. And unfortunately, without that education, certainly some of the very tragic cases we've been involved with of investigations where young children have got exploited, all the information to do that and do those interactions is online. So the key things are always update security settings, treat everything as public, share only with people you know. How long have we got? Minute?
Yeah,
1 minute. Very quickly. There's no point going through that. That basically talks about, it's a great example of social engineering to get passwords out of people. And one of the key messages that we obviously talk about is things like the importance of passwords. Because actually what we're saying is now you've got all of that data which says so much about you, and your life is completely entwined with all of that data. The few things that are keeping it safe are your passwords. It's more and more important to make sure that you have good data management and password management and things like that. That example was a funny video, unfortunately, which just showed how easy it was to elicit people's passwords out of them from a little bit of social engineering. But some of the, I can't go without leaving a sort of crime prevention message at the end of it. And this is about passwords. The person that originally stated about putting characters in and making it as complex as possible came forward quite recently and said, I really wish I hadn't said that, because it's not about that. Because if you can't remember your password, you have to find a way to cope with it. And that's normally far more vulnerable than actually your password in the first place. So you tend to write it down, or you use the same one for different things. And that is where the biggest vulnerability lies. So the current advice is 3 random words. And if you can add any other characters on the end of it, great. But the length is the most important thing in relation to it. That's where the security comes from. And they're just some examples of the 50 most popular passwords. So you see yours on there somewhere. But that, I think, is a very quick spin through.
Thank you.